Chapter 14 of Gray Lensman by E. Smith. Chapter 14. The fashion in which the overlords of Delgon had come under the aegis of Boskonia, while obscure for a time, was in reality quite simple and logical. For upon distant Jarnavon, the Ike had profited signally from Eikland's disastrous raid upon Arisia. Not exactly in the sense suggested by Eukonidor, the Arisian guardian, it is true, but profited nevertheless. They had learned that thought, hitherto considered only a valuable adjunct to achievement, was actually an achievement in itself, that it could be used as a weapon of surpassing power. Eukonidor's homily, as he more than suspected at the time, might as well never have been uttered, for all the effect it had upon the life, or upon the purpose in life, of any single member of the race of the Ike. Eichmil, who had been second of Boskonia, was now first. The others were advanced correspondingly, and a new eighth and ninth had been chosen to complete the roster of the council, which was Boskonia. "The late Eikland," Eichmil stated harshly, after calling the new Boskonia to order, which event took place within a day after it became apparent that the two bold spirits had departed to a bourne from which there was to be no returning, erred seriously, in fact fatally, in underestimating an opponent, even though he himself was prone to harp upon the danger of that very thing. We are agreed that our objectives remain unchanged, and also that greater circumspection must be used until we have succeeded in discovering the hitherto unsuspected potentialities of pure thought. We will now hear from one of our new members, the ninth, also a psychologist, who most fortunately has been studying this situation even before the inception of the expedition which yesterday came to such a catastrophic end. "It is clear," the ninth of Boskonia began, "that Arisia is at present out of the question. Perceiving the possibility of some such denouement, an idea to which I repeatedly called the attention of my predecessor psychologist, the late eighth, I have been long at work upon certain alternative measures. Consider, please, that we learned first of the thought screens from Helmuth, who was then of the opinion that they were first used in the Tellurian galaxy by the natives of Valencia. This belief was amended later, in discredited reports, to one that said devices did in fact originate upon Arisia. This later conclusion we may now accept as a fact, since the Arisians could and did break such screens by the application of mental forces either of greater magnitude than they could withstand, or of some new and as yet unknown composition or pattern. Such screens were, however, and probably still are, used largely and commonly upon the planet Valencia. Therefore, they must have been both necessary and adequate. The deduction is, I believe, defensible, that they were used as a protection against entities who were, and who still may be, employing against the Valencians the weapons of pure thought which we wish to investigate and to acquire. I propose, then, that I and a few others of my selection continue this research not upon Arisia, but upon Valencia and perhaps elsewhere." To this suggestion there was no demur, and a vessel set out forthwith. The visit to Valencia was simple and created no untoward disturbance whatever. In this connection it must be remembered that the natives of Valencia, then in the early ecstasies of discovery by the Galactic Patrol and the consequent acquisition of inertialess flight, were fairly reveling in visits to and from the widely variant peoples of the planets of hundreds of other suns. It must be borne in mind that, since the Ike were, if anything, physically more like the Valencians than were the men of Tellus, the presence of a group of such entities upon the planet would create no more interest or comment than that of a group of human beings. Therefore, That fateful visit went unnoticed at the time, and it was only by long and arduous research, after Kinnison had deduced that some such visit must have been made, that it was shown to have been an actuality. Space forbids any detailed account of what the Ninth of Boskone and his fellows did, although that story of itself would be no mean epic. Suffice it to say, then, that they became well acquainted with the friendly Valencians, they studied and they learned. Particularly did they seek information concerning the noisome overlords of Delgon, although the natives did not care to dwell at any length upon the subject. "Their power is broken," they were wont to inform the questioners, with airy flirtings of tail and wing. "Every known cavern of them, and not a few hitherto unknown caverns, have been blasted out of existence. Whenever one of them dares to obtrude his mentality upon any one of us, he is at once hunted down and slain. Even if they are not all dead, as we think, they certainly are no longer a menace to our peace and security." Having secured all the information available upon Valencia, the Ike went to Delgon, where they devoted all the power of their admittedly first-grade minds and all the not inconsiderable resources of their ship to the task of finding and uniting the remnants of what had once been a flourishing race, the overlords of Delgon. The overlords, that monstrous, repulsive, amoral race which, not excepting even the Ike themselves, achieved the most universal condemnation ever to have been given in the long history of the Galactic Union. The Ike, admittedly deserving of the fate which was theirs, had and have their apologists. The Ike were wrong-minded, all admit. They were antisocial, blood-mad, obsessed with an insatiable lust for power and conquest which nothing except complete extinction could extirpate. Their evil attributes were legion. They were, however, brave. They were organizers par excellence. They were, in their own fashion, creators and doers. They had the courage of their convictions and followed them to the bitter end. Of the overlords, however, nothing good has ever been said. They were debased, cruel, perverted to a degree starkly unthinkable to any normal intelligence, however housed. In their native habitat, they had no weapons, nor need of any. Through sheer power of mind, they reached out to their victims, even upon other planets, and forced them to come to the gloomy caverns in which they had their being. There the victims were tortured to death in numberless unspeakable fashions, and while they died, the captors fed ghoulishly upon the departing life principle of the sufferer. The mechanism of that absorption is entirely unknown, nor is there any adequate evidence as to what end was served by it in the economy of that horrid race. That these orgies were not essential to their physical well-being is certain, since many of the creatures survived for a long time after the frightful rites were rendered impossible. Be that as it may, the Ike sought out and found many surviving overlords. The latter tried to enslave the visitors and to bend them into their hideously sadistic purposes, but to no avail. Not only were the Ike protected by thought screens, they had minds of a fierce power almost, if not quite, equal to the overlord's own. And after these first overtures had been made and channels of communication established, the alliance was a natural. Much has been said and written of the binding power of love. That and other noble emotions have indeed performed wonders. It seems to this historian, however, that all too little has been said of the effectiveness of pure hate as a cementing material. Probably for good and sufficient moral reasons, perhaps because, and for the best, its application has been of comparatively infrequent occurrence. Here, in the case in hand, we have history's best example of two entirely dissimilar peoples working efficiently together under the urge, not of love or of any other lofty sentiment, but of sheer, stark, unalloyed, and corrosive, but common hate. Both hated civilization and everything pertaining to it. Both wanted revenge. wanted it with a searing, furious need almost tangible, a gnawing, burning lust which neither counterbalanced palliation nor brooked denial. And above all, both hated vengefully, furiously, assuringly, every way except blindly, and as yet unknown and unidentified wearer of the million times accursed lens of the Galactic Patrol. The Ike were hard, ruthless, cold, not even having such words in their language as conscience, mercy, or scruple. Their hatred of the lensman was a thing of an intensity unknowable to any human mind. Even that emotion, however, grim as it was and fearsome, paled beside the passionately vitriolic hatred of the overlords of Delgon for the being who had been the nemesis of their race. And when the sheer mental power of the overlords, unthinkably great as it was and operative withal in a fashion surely incomprehensible to us of civilization, was combined with the ingenuity, resourcefulness, and drive, as well as with the scientific ability of the Ike, the results would in any case have been portentous indeed. In this case they were more than portentous, and worse. Those prodigious intellects, fanned into fierce activity by fiery blasts of hatred, produced a thing incredible. End of chapter 14.